Now, we've Clive Mason with See Here.
In last week's programme, I started my international journey in search of communities of deaf and hearing people who communicate with each other with no difficulty, because they share a common language, sign language. The communities have been established over many centuries and have formed a single cultural group, neither deaf nor hearing, but unified. We now know how the deafness is caused and transmitted. And I'm here in Grand Cayman, in the Caribbean, to find out more. Now you see lots of people around, and each one of them is different. Maybe through hair colouring, eye colour, shape of nose, lips and teeth. How does this happen? It's due to our genes, which are inherited from our parents. These genes will decide what you look like. So what about inherited deafness? How does this come about? It's sometimes down to recessive genes, which are passed from parents to children. For example, look at this. These represent the father's genes, and these the mother's. This one will result in a hearing child, and this one a deaf child, and the same is true of the mother's genes. Let me show you how they function. A hearing gene from father and a hearing gene from mother would produce a hearing child. Now a deaf gene from the father and a hearing gene from the mother would also produce a hearing child. A hearing gene from the father and a deaf gene from the mother would also produce a hearing child. However, a deaf gene from the father and a deaf gene from the mother would produce a deaf child. So now we know that if each parent has a recessive gene, then each of their children has a 1 in 4 chance of being deaf. So now that we know all this and how it happens, what can we do about it? At the hospital in Georgetown, I met the island's genetics counsellor, Janet Hislop, who has compiled a full family tree of all the people in East End, tracing their ancestry back over 8 generations to one common ancestor. But this family tree has much more information in it than merely facts about which families in the town are prone to deafness.
Well, it tells me several things. It tells me the nature of the disease, whether it's a recessive or a dominant disorder, which has an impact on what I would tell a person when I'm counseling them about the risks of having children with the particular hearing problem. And it also tells me something about the incidence of the disease in the population in which, that I'm studying.
Can you tell me what's the proportion of deaf people on the island compared to the rest of the world?
In the East End population, where we find most of our deaf people, the incidence of the gene which causes that particular kind of deafness seems to be 1 in 7, as opposed to other areas in the world where this type of deafness occurs. The incidence is more like 1 in 70. So it seems as if the gene is 10 times more prevalent in the population in East End than it is in other areas of the world.
Is there anything we can or should do about it?
The thing that we can do is educate the people in the population that there is the possibility and that this of having children that are affected with this particular disorder. And should do, I guess, we should do that because I think in all fairness they ought to know. But I don't advocate doing anything radical like telling them not to have children or tying the tubes of women who we know are carrying the gene or anything like that. No, God forbid. I think that basically education is the only thing we can and should do.
Now, you may have noticed one peculiar thing about my visit to this island. East End is said to have the highest percentage of deaf people anywhere in the world, and yet I've not spoken to any of them. There are several reasons. Some families do see the deafness as a stigma. They are ashamed of it. They didn't want to speak to us. Others seem never to be around. They were busy working, doing other things, busy with life. But perhaps most important, as most of the deaf people had been born hearing and gradually became deaf, they were never exposed to sign language. So there was a considerable communication difficulty. But what I did discover on the island was that these East Enders were not the only deaf people. There were others, born deaf sign language users. On the famous 7 Mile Beach, the holiday resort area, I met Anna Jackson and her scuba diving friend Kate.
She's a good teacher of signing. Yes, and she's a good teacher of diving too.
Now, you sign, you're teaching hearing people to sign, and your friends seem to be hearing. Do you have any deaf friends here?
Yes, I have some deaf friends, but I'm the only deaf person who knows how to dive. But I want Kate to teach other deaf people to dive.
Do you know how many deaf people there are here?
There's about 10 who know sign language. There are more deaf people than that, but they don't know sign. I don't know how many people altogether.
So, do deaf people tend to get together and meet socially?
Not really, no. Most deaf people tend to mix with hearing people. I have a lot of hearing friends and I get on well with them.
So why have you tended to mix with hearing people, do you think?
Well, because we live in a hearing world on this island, and I have to get on with hearing people in the hearing world. There are so few deaf people on the island anyway.
Now, Kate, I'm interested in what your friend was saying, that she enjoys meeting hearing friends. Well, now you're friends with Anna. Do you want to make more deaf friends?
Well, yes, I want to teach more deaf people to dive.
That's good, but why?
Well, because, well, the sport is so beautiful. It's lovely down there, and all people should dive here, and that includes deaf people.
Now, were you born here in Cayman?
Yes, yes, I was born here.
Right, now, I know that many deaf people in this situation may well go somewhere like a deaf school in Florida and get strongly involved in the deaf community and think that's wonderful and wouldn't want to come back to a small community, to an island like this, and would decide to stay there and never come back. Why did you come back?
Why did I come back? Well, because I'm happy here. I wanted to be with my family. My life is here. This is my island, it's my country, and it's my home.
Well, I have to say that there are many people back in Britain who will be surprised, even disappointed, to see what's going on in Grand Cayman. One community, deaf and hearing people, and little or no sign of deaf culture. Now, this may have something to do with the fact that there are so few deaf people on the island who sign. On the other hand, it may be that it is something to do with need. If everyone can communicate, why have a different culture? I'm interested to find out whether Grand Cayman and Martha's Vineyard are unique. And are there other communities like this around the world? Well, here we are on the last lap of our journey. We're in Mexico. As you've just seen, it's been a bit of a culture shock. The architecture, the food and the people are all so different to what I'm used to. The houses are thatched mud huts, and the farmland has been cut out of the surrounding shrub. That's where they plant their crops. Once inside the village, I'm beginning to realize just what I've let myself in for. Are these Maya people going to understand me? Will I understand them? One of the first things I notice is how independent the family units are within the village. Each house is surrounded by a stone wall. Inside the compound are a number of one-room dwellings, some for sleeping, one for cooking. The men, almost all farmers, are the providers, and the women, the cooks and mothers. It's all well organized, simple rather than primitive, a very traditional society. been deaf from birth, have you?
Yes, I haven't been able to hear all my life.
Right, and have you been signing since you were very little?
Yes,
Good. So it's the same for everyone here, isn't it?
yes, that's right.
So where do you live? Where's your house?
Over there.
Ah, so you live over there, right. Now this man's name sign is this. And he's showing me where to go to meet the villagers who are planting crops. And there are some deaf people there, so it should be interesting. Now, is it a long way to this field where they're planting? Now, you're deaf, are you?
Yes, I cannot hear.
Right, and you're the same.
Yes, that's right.
So all of us are deaf. Now, do you get paid for working here? Do you get money?
Yes, regularly, every 5 days.
Right, so you work, you do the planting. When you finish that, you go and you get your money every 5 days.
Yes, that's right.
I'm just wondering if you have any snakes around here, do you?
Yes, they coil themselves around the plants, so you have to be careful. Watch where you put your feet, because they can bite you. It's pretty painful, and you get some enormous swellings.
So are there lots of them around here?
Oh yes, lots of them.
Have either one of you ever been bitten?
No, if you see one, you just cut it in two. Just kill it. So you just hit it once, and that's it. That's right.
Well, so far so good. There's been no real communication difficulty. We've all of us been using a kind of international sign. We've learned different signs from each other, and it's all been very friendly. Of the 400 people in the village, 13 are deaf, quite a high proportion. My next visit is to the main branch of the Koyi Koyi family, which, as was the case with the Rankin family in Grand Cayman, seems to be the deaf family in the village. This is Raimondo, the head of the family. 3 of his 7 children are deaf. Is this house yours?
Yes. There are 7 of us, and we couldn't all sleep in there. Obviously. We built them ourselves. This is where we hang our hammocks.
Good. Now, there's an awful lot of work involved in building a house like this, isn't there? You have to cut all the materials and then build it. How long does it take? How much work's involved? Is it hours and hours, or even days? How many days?
Well, we have to go and cut all the materials and then carry them here. We plant the main supports in the ground all the way around. Then these cross pieces are fitted. Then the vertical reeds are fitted after that. Then we get the mat from the ground and put it in between here. We chop up grass and mix it up with the mud and then put it on the walls by hand. And it's good. Then the next day we finish it off at the bottom. We have to make sure that when we put the mat on the walls, that it's put on properly.
Now, At what time do you wake up in the mornings?
Oh, we don't bother with time. We don't look at watches. We know it's time to get up when the sun is up, and we can hear the chickens scratching around for food. That's the time to get up, and then we go off to work.
You're married, aren't you? Where's your wife?
She's over there. She's busy.
Oh, she's busy, is she?
And my house is over there.
Right. Now, your wife, is she hearing?
Yes. Are you married?
Me? I'm divorced.
Do you have any children?
Yes, I've got 4.
Do they live with you?
No, I see them, though. They're actually with my wife. My children live with my wife, but I see them regularly, and that's good.
Okay, good. What are your children?
Well, I have 3 boys and 1 girl.
How old are they?
Well, the eldest girl is 16. The next one is 15. The next one is 4, and the youngest is 2. Is he your son?
Yes, he's 7.
7, right.
I also have 1 girl who's at the house, I think.
Right, is she hearing?
Yes, she's hearing. I have 2 children. My girl is 4, and he's
Right,
7.
so your daughter's 4 and your son's 7, right. Now, is your daughter hearing?
Yes, and he's deaf.
And you're deaf too, aren't you?
No, I'm hearing.
You're hearing? This was a fascinating experience. At last, exposure to the real native Maya sign language. And although this villager could understand my rudimentary Maya signs, I have to say that at first, I couldn't understand any of hers. But after a while, I began to understand some of it. Yesterday, a woman from the village died, and during the night, the men made a coffin. Today, she's going to be buried, and everyone from the village is walking to the next village where the funeral will take place. So this is an opportunity for deaf people from 2 villages to get together. A Maya funeral is so very different to ours. One of the more obvious features being that it's the women who conduct the service. The men stand around observing, and chatting, and drinking. There were 2 of these buckets. One contained water, and the other rum and coke. Now that was interesting. We had a group of 4 hearing people talking to each other, and 2 deaf men joined the group. Immediately, everyone started to use sign language. It's really wonderful. This community, where deaf and hearing people communicate with such ease, is probably one of the last remaining in the world. How long will it last? Will it go the way of all the others? The signs are all there. The clearest is the one we in Britain have to contend with: television. It's just arrived here. When will the deaf people realize that they have no access and therefore will no longer be fully integrated? The second sign was this public meeting, called soon after we arrived. This is the equivalent of the village hall, and they use it for all the important events in the village. They get together and have a meeting. Of course, our arrival was an important event and an occasion to do just that. It's an opportunity for us to explain who we are and introduce ourselves. This meeting did surprise me. The visiting speaker spoke in Spanish, which was then translated into Maya, but not into Maya sign. Why? Then everyone would have understood, and not just the hearing Maya people. We were told that the deaf would have been told what went on later. But that's not the same. Now, I remember a long time ago reading a book about Martha's Vineyard called Everyone Here Spoke Sign Language. It was about a deaf community there in days gone by. I found it totally enthralling. It made me wish I was involved during that time, what with deaf and hearing people being equal. I really wanted that, but of course I knew it was the one and only place of its kind in the world, and it had now gone. Sometime after reading the book, I went to Gallaudet University, where I was told that a similar village exists here in the Yucatan in Mexico. I was a little cynical about it, but after arriving here and meeting everyone, I was very surprised to find that it was true. Everyone here does use sign language, and it's difficult to distinguish the deaf from the hearing. What exists here is one community, but with no deaf culture or deaf politics. Everyone seems happy, and they all get along with each other. It makes me feel really at home. I know I had some initial concerns, since I'm so used to having deaf culture and politics at home. I thought that might be a problem, but it's not. It's perfect, and I feel privileged to be here. I feel totally at home, and I shall take back with me some wonderful memories of this experience.